Hello and welcome to the theElpyDimension. I'm your guide, Elpy. Today is the 9th of November, 2024, and this is bin number 3. I have not been in here since the 17th of October. I'm not going to say anything about being behind or not being behind, or I'm just going to take actions, okay? Maybe I'll have better luck. Okay, last time I fed, which was 13 days, so the 4th, so I fed on the 4th of October, and then 13 days later I fed on the 17th of October. This last feeding was a rushed feeding. Prior to that, it had been something of a small feeding. In the last feeding in this bin, I found a lot of mites on the banana peels, which I've got more whole bananas today. And I removed those peels, and I was surprised not to have found more worms in here than what I found. I know this is a small bin, or I mean this population is smaller, especially relative to the size of the bin. And this is a population that's recovering from a die-off. How they died, I'm not sure, but it's been months since I've been working to recover them. And it may have been something, and this is a mixed worm bin, by the way, which means could be, or there's blue worms and red wigglers. I'm not sure that I even have any European night crawlers left. I've always said I don't know how to tell the difference between the European night crawlers and the red wigglers, and while making a blue worm versus red worm identification video myself, I learned that Mimi's Worms and Gardens also has a identification video, and I will link that. I'll still post my own, but I do recommend you checking out her video. But I learned that, really the biggest difference with the night crawlers is their size. And I don't know, is this an immature night crawler? Because it doesn't have a clitellum. So this is an immature worm. But I definitely have red wigglers and blue worms. So anyway, so this bin in the last month and a half has been completely harvested. The bin number 4 is rebounding, also experienced a mass die-off and is rebounding much faster than this bin. And in the last video, I was really surprised with not finding more worms. However, you might go check it out. They're actually on the shorter side. I think this last video was like 13 minutes. But after I went to bin 4, I discovered a ton, which is right next door. I discovered a ton of worms over there. It's so many. And it's not impossible that population has just blown up like that. But it also occurred to me that maybe worms from this bin moved over there because it was such a massive, that's a cocoon, such a massive feeding for that bin that they just, that's where they wanted to be maybe. So that was, this worm has a clitellum, so I believe this is a red wiggler. It's a smaller worm. Okay, so that's possible. It's also possible that the mites outcompete the worms for food. However, I feed enough that they shouldn't be dying from starving. And I added wet packing cardboard that's been outside in a bucket, some cabbage leaves, some tomatoes, pieces of an apple, a small volunteer melon, and I topped it with some burdock leaves, some shredded paper. Well, I added the natural material and then covered with the shredded paper. So we're seeing some worms down in here. This material is pretty cool, as in temperature cool. Okay, these looks like pieces of the apple. There's mites on this, a lot. Not a ton, but since there are no worms, only mites, I'm going to throw that in the bucket that still has a little bit of castings from the last harvest and will be used for further harvests. So let's just go ahead and get into the feeding zone. Okay, I said today is the 9th and I fed on the 17th, so wow, 23 days. I'm letting myself get way too far behind. I'm going to put this shredded top paper over there. So it's been over 3 weeks since I've been in here. Now, if you've been in here before, you may have heard me, or any of my bins this summer, you may have heard me talk about the apples that I've been getting lately and feeling like some of these worms or some of these apples are really not interesting to the worms. And here is a piece of apple. Is it because the mites take all the goodness, outcompete, or does it have something to do with the apples? So, there's a couple of worms. Here's the cardboard. Worms in the cardboard. Worms underneath it. Tomato skin. Oh, there's some more of our friends down here. I need to get a better angle to go ahead and scoop that. It's because I'm trying too hard to save this shredded material to put back on top. All right, let's move a little bit faster. So the material is not overly wet. Thought for a second we had a breeding worm, but we don't. We have a small red wiggler with a very bulging clitellum, which makes me think it's going to release a cocoon soon. So it's not overly wet. It's not dry, but it's just moist material. Remember, this is the feeding zone. This is a cabbage leaf. Still very well intact, as we would expect. Some worms hanging out. Yeah, they're chilling in the cabbage leaf. But overall, well, yeah, there's a bunch of worms in here. Such pretty colors. So, a bunch of worms, but not a crazy amount. Let's go ahead and put that back down there. Okay, and we'll just continue our search through the bin, see how everyone's looking. I'm not seeing any evidence of the plant matter that we put on top. I'm not seeing any worms over here in this corner. A little bit of a rotten egg smell, very, very faint. This is hair, and there's a worm hanging out in there. And a couple, and that was down in the bottom corner. So again, this material is moist, but not wet. And if we want them to breed, we do want it to be wet. Now, I think that if worms did move from here to there, they might not want to come back, because I've not given them much of a reason to be excited about coming back. So we found some nice worms, and that's great, but nothing impressive. It's kind of how I felt last time. Like, they're there, and those that are here look good, but what's really going on? So, here's what we're going to do. Bucket, some mulch leaves. And stickers shouldn't be in there. So, now in bin 1, at this time I've not posted that video. I put these on top. But with these guys, I had some more of that wet. It's been sitting around, so it's not very fresh, but some more of that wet packing cardboard. It's paint on my jacket. And there's a little bit of water hanging out in this bucket. So I put that down, and then we're going to dose it with these leaves. And I am going to wind up adding some water. I'm going to pour a bunch of water over this bin. Okay, but first as in before the water, we're going to give them 2 overripe bananas. They are organic bananas. I don't always buy organic bananas, but I do think they taste better. And I really can't stand bananas once they are ripe. I try to freeze them before this, but they'll go to the worms. And I have some pumpkins. The critters have been trying to get to it that did not have time to ripen. This is a very small one. That's why I'm also giving the banana that we're going to give these guys. So let's go ahead and cover that nicely with the leaves. So we'll move this, and then we're going to spread this shredded paper out again. I need to go back and look at the other videos and see, is it just that this population isn't really growing, and it's not, is it that it's not impressive because it's not growing, or have their numbers declined? And all right, let me go get some water. All right, of course I had to spill water. I'm going to give them a lot of water. So this is a 16-ounce container. Again, I'm nowhere near needing to harvest castings, so I want the material to be wet to encourage breeding. I just added a bunch of mostly dry leaves. What do you think? One more? I think a little bit less than a whole one. All right, there you have it. Bin number 3, the 9th of November 2024. After 23 days of not feeding them. I am surprised that there was any remnants of the apple pieces, especially since they were in pieces, and the tomato skin, but everything else was gone except for seeds. Next up, I forgot to add these, so we'll add them next time. But this is some wood from came across a pine tree that had split in half, and it was well dried, and I thought, you know what, this would be just a fun material to add. All right, now I'm going to move on over to bin number 4 and give them basically the same feeding, except they'll get a slightly bigger pumpkin and 3 bananas. This is their ripe pumpkin that has endured some chewing and some freezing. Okay, I appreciate your time and your interest. Let me know in the comments what you think, and stay tuned. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, whichever works for you. I'd love to hear from you in the comments, and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you're interested in following along with these bins. So stay tuned. Now I'm going to bin 4. Be safe, be well, bye for now.